instructional materials. And leveraging our ESSER funds, we were able to secure quality instructional materials to increase consistency across schools and alignment of curriculum to standards. And with the high levels of transiency that we have in the district and many new teachers, that consistency of curriculum has been a significant support to ensure baseline of quality instruction. We've been continually touted for the success of our magnet schools and our CTAs. Magnet Schools of America just recognized 22 of our schools for excellence, 13 with distinction, and 5 for excellence. We also just recently opened Northeast CTA and are opening our South CTA next year. Our graduation rates remain strong. After achieving a high of 85.8% in 2019, we are slowly recovering and holding steady at 81.5% for the last 2 years. And this speaks to the work that's being done by our high school principals and everyone in our high schools with working with and getting to know each student. Our chronic absenteeism rates are also starting to stabilize, coming down from the high of 40.6% in 21-22 down to 31.3% last year. That's the closest we've gotten to our pre-pandemic levels of 21.9%. And finally, we've had a significant shift in the constitution of our board with 4 new elected trustees and our 4 appointed trustees. The board has already shown its ability to function at a much higher level compared to previous years and is moving towards balanced governance, which is a significant positive. Simple actions have been taken to streamline meetings so we can spend time more effectively on what matters, which is our students. For example, I love that we've simplified the process so we're not doing the Madam President, the board, superintendent to your question. Great move there, love it. And I'm so heartened to have the voices of our appointed trustees on the board and have them be able to speak on behalf of our community. So while we should always celebrate our successes, we need to own our weaknesses and identify plans of action on how we can improve. Number one, staff vacancies continues to be a significant issue, particularly in schools that need quality teachers the most in our urban. We need to evaluate our systems and processes for hiring so that our speed is competitive with the market. Too often, I've heard candidates give up because they've gotten an offer elsewhere, somewhere faster. I've heard of individuals who have volunteered to give their time, filled out the application, and never heard back. We also have MOUs in place currently that limit the ability of retired educators to return back to teaching. We've suffered long and hard with transparency. Our community, our parents and guardians, legislators expect us to be good stewards of the limited resources that we've provided and to be open and honest about the actions that we take. Situations such as blocking public record requests, signing high-level contracts with our high-level administrators without them coming to the board, and releasing strategic budgets that require schools to make significant cuts without any cuts to central greatly hamper our credibility. As a district, we've struggled with accountability. This includes ESSER funds being spent on glamorous trips, schools having to scramble when we failed to account for salary increases that were part of our negotiated agreements with our labor unions, and our increases in litigation costs. We closed Lundy without even having notified our community. For the last several years, we've fallen short on targets from Focus 2024 without identifying meaningful next steps to reverse course and improve. And I think of it from a business perspective. If a business were to report to their board and their shareholders that they missed a target, they would immediately identify the actions to be implemented that next quarter or next year and move on. Over the last 6 years, the district has become more insular and communication channels have degraded. Superintendent's office has unfortunately contributed to board dysfunction by not always ensuring that if one trustee receives information, all trustees receive that information and in a timely manner. Our municipalities are frustrated with generic canned presentations that are not aligned to the needs of their community and the questions that they have. And in the past, the district has done a much better job of meeting with our community members, and a lot of those meetings have been curtailed, if not stopped. As a parent, I receive the district's newsletter, and too often I see just some of the same topics in there. And I feel like it's an opportunity where we could provide more meaningful ways for parents to get useful information and to be able to engage parents in the education process. We have a significant culture and climate problem that needs to be rooted out and resolved, which is going to take some time. Over the last 6 years, there's been systematic retaliation against staff. Common phrases when I talk to staff are keep your head down or don't speak up. I talked to one employee who this past year, after attending a public event in their official role, was immediately had a supervisor at the door the next day wondering why they were. We need to rebuild our relationships with our stakeholders. This includes Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, Henderson, Clark County, and our rural communities. We suffered from a prolonged and unnecessary contract dispute with CCA based on a false narrative that funds from SB 231 were temporary. I've touched on some issues with the budget already as a weakness, and while we have addressed some process issues recently with our budget development, we still have work to do in identifying and prioritizing available resources so that we can push them to schools. The board's operational authority needs to be reinstated to ensure effective governance. Too many topics over the last few years have been deemed operational. Anything involving compensation must be brought to our board for approval, period. Between employee retirement and incentives and turnover, we've had a loss of institutional knowledge that needs to be reestablished. We lost many leaders and have had significant turnover in critical positions, particularly in technology, operations, and budget. And while we have seen some modest gains, particularly in elementary mathematics, student achievement remains stagnant. We need to focus on our subgroups that are most at risk to bring them up to the bar. When I left the district in 2019, 51% of our schools received a 3-star rating or higher. That number is now 35%. With the quality instructional materials that we have in place, we need to begin letting teachers teach again and allowing them to develop proficiency in teaching that content and using those resources. All right, that was heavy. Despite some weaknesses, we do have some opportunities that if we leverage them properly could help us significantly. First and foremost, our legislative session just started a few weeks ago, and there are dozens of bills focused on education. We need to engage quickly with our legislators to provide meaningful input and help shape the laws and the funding coming out of this biennium. With the 2015 bond program sunsetting, we need to begin working on the next bond program and prioritizing the needs for the next 10 years in alignment with our partner, Canon Design. With student enrollment projections likely to plateau, we have a chance to focus on necessary repairs and modifications rather than responding to rapid growth as we've had to do for so long, and to reimagine some of our under-enrolled sites through innovative approaches. Our strategic plan, Focus 2024, has expired and we're without a plan this time. And while Focus 2024 was penned by a small few locked in a room at Sahara, we have an opportunity to do it right and engage our stakeholders and community in developing a plan that aligns with the expectations and needs of our parents, guardians, businesses, and our community. We're currently in contract negotiation season with our employee labor groups, and pending funding from the legislature, we have the opportunity to increase quality staffing and retention. Finally, our parents, guardians, community members, and staff on SOTs are a meaningful, untapped resource with hundreds of individuals that are highly engaged and committed to improving learning. By expanding opportunities for our SOT members to be further involved, we could increase two-way communication and the overall quality of district decisions. Lastly, there are some emergent threats from outside the district that are on the horizon. There continues to be increased competition from alternative education providers, including charters, private schools, and homeschool. Due to shifts in population, we're anticipating a drop of about 5,000 students over the next 5 years. We need to be proactive about providing our families with true choice and open enrollment, and making sure that our parents are aware of the quality options that are available within CCSD. When the district fails to be proactive, the legislature tends to get involved and create legislation for districts over 100,000 students. For example, there's a BDR in response to the district's actions with Lundy on outlining a school closure process. Federal funding through title grants, Medicaid reimbursement, and food services represent a significant portion of our district revenue sources, and changes at the federal level have the potential to create an existential crisis for both us here in Clark County and the state. Inflation has caused construction and maintenance costs to increase significantly, and with inflation continuing to remain above historical averages, we're competing for limited construction bandwidth in the valley with weakening dollars. Finally, the Nevada Department of Education and State Board have been working on updates to school start times. To date, we've been flat-footed on this topic, and we could be a proactive partner to ensure that potential changes align with the best needs of our students and families and can be effectively implemented. So based on my SWOT analysis, I've identified 6 key areas of focus for my initial re-entry plan with the district. So these include organizational culture and climate, hiring and retention, engagement with our students, parents, guardians, teachers, administrators, community, municipalities, elected officials, engaging our stakeholders in the development of a strategic plan with annual SMART goals, evaluating our current systems, processes, policies, and tools, and driving resources and decision-making to sites. And I look forward to getting into more details of those specifics of the plan as I move through the process. I greatly appreciate the work that the board, HYA, along with everyone in our community has done on the superintendent leadership profile. And the fact that we had so many people come out and provide input speaks to the level of engagement and interest with picking our next superintendent. From the profile, participants want a leader who can unify the district, drive transformational change, and restore trust. Our next superintendent must make data-driven decisions and have a focus and urgency around student achievement with a background of having worked in schools as a teacher and a principal. The superintendent must build collaborative relationships with everyone in the school community. The superintendent must have a strong financial acumen and direct resources to the classroom. The superintendent must have proven experience and success with a deep understanding of CCSD and of our state. And the superintendent needs to be a clear, transparent communicator who can speak with sincerity and intention. I believe that my skill set and background and experiences align strongly with that profile. I have a proven track record of having worked with stakeholders. In Paradise Valley, we embarked on a collaborative process with our stakeholders to develop a strategic plan and vision for the district. I had the experience of repeatedly coming into new roles in which the culture and climate needed to be turned around from previous leadership. And I've consistently worked collaboratively with our employee labor groups as superintendent in Paradise Valley to ensure that contracts were negotiated with fairness and with the bigger picture in mind, with groups working together for the common good of the district. I've consistently been a leader for transformational change. Many of the changes that I implemented in CCSD are still in place to this day. I worked through the process with Nevada Department of Education to simplify the teacher evaluation process for the NEPF. Along with a great team, I led the largest expansion of magnet schools in CCSD history, adding 11 schools and 4,000 seats. I led the initiatives for online learning, implementing Canvas back in 2013, which we currently use. And I established our online credit retrieval program for high schools. Additionally, I took Google from just a pilot to being the productivity suite that is used district-wide when we moved away from Interact. To suggest that I consistently make data-driven decisions would be an understatement. Many of those who know me for a long time still refer to me as the old moniker when I was a coordinator, which was the data dude, harkening back to my time working in the Northwest region with 61 schools. I've also had the privilege to lead the RC division not once, but twice, once as an interim superintendent in 2015, and then as the full-time superintendent in 2018. My focus throughout my career has been consistently on improving student achievement. As a math and Spanish teacher, dean, assistant principal, coordinator, assistant superintendent, and CEO, my background is in instruction. And I've been blessed with success in every role, earning high-achieving 4- and 5-star designations at Escobedo Middle School, Thurman White Middle School, and at all 9 of our current locations with Nevada State High School. I've been in education for 29 years, including 22 here in Clark County. And I've been in the role of assistant leader since leaving the district in 2019. I'm extremely proud of the work that I've done throughout my career of building positive relationships with our stakeholders and empowering those voices to help shape positive decisions. In Paradise Valley, I regularly met with our employee group leads, our United Parent Council, and principals to share information and get feedback to inform district decisions. With the challenges that we have had as the district with the budget, we need a leader with a strong understanding of the budget process and of state funding. My dissertation and research background is in school finance. While in CCSD, I worked with strategic budgets and helped guide the development of budgets annually when I was a principal and as a assistant superintendent, excuse me. I regularly calculated additional allocations for the district, including region differentiated funding formulas and proficiency funding. And in my leadership roles at PV and Nevada State, I oversaw the budget development and approval process and ensured compliance with state reporting. I often quip that the budget is your fiscal representation of your priorities, and I consistently work to ensure that the budget reflected what mattered most to our students. I believe I'm uniquely situated with a deep knowledge and understanding of the district and Nevada, but with ample outside experience and perspective to objectively move the district forward. I was the lead on implementing the structure and development of the initial SOTs. I literally wrote the manual on the guidelines and process for the initial training efforts when AB 469 rolled out. In Paradise Valley, I worked closely with our legislators to provide meaningful, timely input on legislation. And when I was in CCSD, particularly in my role at CPD, I regularly provided significant input on proposed legislation to ensure the best outcomes would align with the intent of the laws, specifically helping with revisions to read by grade 3. So to close, while I believe there's a lot of work that we need to do as a district, I'm excited for the opportunity and the challenge. As one of the 6 finalists back in 2018, I believe I've only benefited from having the additional experiences outside of the district since that time, and am even more ready to tackle the challenges of the role. I grew up as a PK, a pastor's kid. I remember having red meal tickets as a free lunch student. I believe that education is the great equalizer for our students, and that a strong education system can allow our children to fulfill their dreams. I taught, served as a principal, and was a district leader here in CCSD. Home means Nevada for me. I've supported the students and been a part of our community for over 20 years, and all of my children have either graduated from or are enrolled currently in a CCSD school. I thank you for your time today. Look forward to the next steps in the process as we select the 13th superintendent of the Clark County School District. Y es mi placer para ser considerado para el puesto de superintendente del condado de Clark. Gracias por su tiempo esta noche. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give Dr. Welch a round of applause. We will now take questions from each of the trustees. Please put your name in the queue. And Dr. Welch, what we'll do is ask the question briefly and concisely to give you the most amount of time to respond. It'll be about 3 minutes total before we move to the next question. So, Trustee Satori.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. Thank you tonight. Can I ask you a little bit more? You brought up a few times about the culture and the current culture and climate and the need to prepare that. Can you just speak a little bit more to that? What would be your top strategies or ways to really connect with the community? What would be some of the things that you see right off the get-go that you would do to really get that buy-in and trust?
Sure, thank you, Satori. I think one of the first things is that leadership starts at the top. And so really making sure that my leadership team understands my expectations in terms of how we're engaging and having that filter down through what we do. I believe it also is incumbent on us in terms of how we're working with our employees. So working with our employee management relations group, making sure that the expectations are clear in terms of how we're engaging with staff, as well as engaging upwards and getting feedback from all those in our school and really hearing what some of those issues are and being able to solve some issues.
Thank you. Trustee Biasotti.
Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Welsh. You mentioned our high school graduation rates have increased, yet our proficiency rates have not. What do you think is the main reason? I know there's a lot of reasons, but the main one for that, and what would you do to address it?
Thank you, Member Biasotti. I think one thing in particular that's important for us all to recognize, and I know this is a narrative that is out there very frequently, remember that the ACT is a measure of college readiness, whereas high school graduation is not. That being said, I still think we obviously have work to do. I also recognize the fact that when we compare our ACT rates to other places in the country, we are one of the few states where every student takes the ACT. There are only a handful of states, I believe it's about 5 or 6, where that is the case. So sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge to compare those rates when you're talking with other states. But more to that point, I think it speaks to making sure that we have, one, the rigor of our instruction at the high school level, as well as two, really making sure that all of our students at the high school level have the opportunity to participate in the most advanced coursework, and that we're pushing students to make sure that they're taking those courses as they get through high school and not taking that senior year off, as I often see. You see a lot of seniors there where they have a schedule and it's just 4 classes and it's almost like kind of like coasting. I think we could do a lot better, and that would help us push our students a lot further.
Thank you. Trustee Dominguez?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Dr. Welsh, for being here. I know it's difficult for family to run, and so I appreciate you putting in your application. You said a quote as that you heard from staff is to keep your head down. How would you work to rebuild the relationships and to have a more collaborative culture with the staff?
Thank you, Member Dominguez. I think one thing in particular is it comes down to trust. And so we've got to rebuild that trust with our staff. I think in a lot of cases that's been part of the issue is people don't feel like they can speak out and speak critically of things. We don't improve if we're not listening to feedback, meaningful, constructive feedback, and taking action on it. So I think that's certainly a big component of it. And then I think another piece is making sure that we have the systems, processes, structured in place to be able to get that feedback in positive ways. I liken back to some of my experiences working here in Clark County and previously in PV, working with families and working with our staff, making sure that we have regular meetings with, let's say, for example, all of our leads of our principals, our union leads. I had a group that we called SLAC Superintendent Leadership Advisory Council, where I met with the leads for each of those different entities. And it was really our opportunity to talk some shop and say, what's really going on? And so I think it comes back to building those relationships and trust, having those regular connections to be able to be listening and be responsive.
Thank you. Trustee Esparza-Straffigan?
Thank you, Dr. Welsh. I appreciated your brutal facts of our weaknesses. You hit and you went deep. So I want to talk about one that you brought about the loss of institutional knowledge. So what is your concrete plan? Because those are the gaps we've noticed with our budget situation and with other areas that we've learned lessons with some of our personnel.
Yes, thank you, Esparza-Straffigan. Couple of things there. I mean, one, we definitely need a strong CFO coming into this role. Obviously, that's a big role that we have, and that's going to be a big focus when I'm coming in. I think another piece is, again, in particular, some of the areas from what I've gathered in my analysis. Technology is another big area where we've had some losses. Facilities operations, another big area. And so I think part of it is going to be assessing that talent that's there, and then also looking to outside sources that maybe be able to provide us with some expertise to help rebuild some of those things. I could certainly get into more detail about some of the technology pieces, but.
Thank you. Trustee Barron?
Thank you, Madam President. Bienvenido, licenciado Walsh. Of course, you know, I've had a chance to read your resume, and I couldn't help but notice that, you know, you built a new campus in North Las Vegas, which, you know, I really thank you. So I noticed in your initial focus areas, you're going to dig down deep on retention and recruitment, which I guess that's a good thing. But now, of course, in East Las Vegas and North Las Vegas, despite I am very happy for the efforts that the district had brought to address this, but still we are the communities who are least likely to have a licensed teacher in front of students. Do you have any initial thoughts, any initial plans on how you could address this specifically, again, in North Las Vegas / East Las Vegas?
Yes, thank you, Trustee Brown. Yeah, specifically, part of it comes down to the incentives and the structures we have in place to attract the best talent to those schools. And I think that's something we've been particularly flat-footed on, is making sure that we're, you know, whether it's through pay incentives or other types of things, to be able to get the best people. I think there's some other structure and process pieces in terms of how we do our hiring process I remember, back in the day when you got a call from the school district, you got one phone call, and if you didn't pick up the phone and take that position, like you were out. That was it. I think it's shifted too far the other way where people feel like they can cherry pick and look for their best opportunity, or at least what they think might be their best opportunity. And I think we need to make some of those places more attractive to people.
Thank you, trustee Zamora.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Dr. Welsh. My question is about Paradise Valley, yes? And the strategic plan. Can you talk a little bit about how you worked with your governing board? What was that collaboration like? And how you all came together for that?
Absolutely. And just for the record too, for those who might be Googling it, Paradise Valley School District is not in Paradise Valley, which I know sounds weird, because you'll probably look up Paradise Valley and think, wow, that's a really affluent community. I had none, just so you know. So to your question though, specifically, we had a very solid structure and process in place. We engaged with an outside partner to help us work through that development, and our governing body had membership on those key committees that were part of that process, so that as we were listening to our community and all of our stakeholders, they were part of that process there and helping to guide. As we started to hear those emerging themes and identify the things that we wanted to include, they were part of that to make sure that we were on the same page, and then bringing that back to the fold.
Thank you, trustee Stevens.
Thank you, Dr. Welsh. I was looking at your 6 focus areas, and one of them is evaluating current systems, processes, policies, and tools. How do you do that? And then how do you, under your leadership, what would it look like to make those evaluations? What would your process be? And then how would you implement those changes?
Thank you, Member Stevens. Well, I think kind of working backwards a bit, I will say one thing is that I believe that we should be having the end in mind before we start with those new initiatives. I think that's an easy mistake to make that we make a lot of times in education. And I'll give a good example of that. We have policies such as our grading policies that somewhat not that big at this point. We have our cell phone policy. Like we roll these things out, but we don't at the outset say, identify what the metrics are for success. Like how will we know if it worked? And how are we checking along the way to see if things are working, and if they're not, to make those course corrections. So I think part of it comes back to building that analysis structure into new initiatives as we roll them out, so that we're not coming back 2-3 years later and saying, well, hey, did it work? I think that's a big piece of it. But then more to your question, I think it means delving into the data on some of those pieces to identify, especially things that are already out there. The cat's already on the bag, you can't change that. But identifying the data that we have to be able to see how things are working. If they're not working, what adjustments can we make? Or if it's something that's just totally not working, do we need to scrap it and start over?
Thank you, trustee Cavazos.
Thank you for being here, Dr. Welsh. Nice to see you again. We have a lot of different issues having to do with technology, ranging all the way from huge cyber breaches that cause a lot of anxiety to something more in the trenches, like losing our site-based technicians. As the data dude, how would you assess what needs to be done, and how would you go about that, making changes that are needed?
Yes, thank you, trustee Cavazos. Well, I think one big advantage we have is I know there are several folks within our community, including some staff that are not with us that have since retired, that would be glad to help lend some expertise on a short-term basis to be able to look at some of those pieces. Just some of the things that I'm aware of that I know are issues. I mean, we know Chromebook refreshment is a big issue, where that's something that's been now thrust upon the schools. Schools are now having to bear the burden of those refreshments that used to be something at the district level. That's going to cause some stress there. We need to look at that. I think there are still some pieces even from our cyber attack that I don't necessarily have a warm and fuzzy feeling about, knowing that those have been resolved. So being able to have some experts, technology is the kind of area where if you don't have the expertise, you really can't take it. And so making sure that we have experts in those areas and leveraging that to be able to assist us to make sure that those things are resolved. So I would say, really to your question, it's looking internally in terms of what we have. Some of it is systems and processes that I know that we have had in place in the past, that my understanding is have not necessarily been carried forward and getting those back into place, and then leveraging some outside assistance to help us to see from an outside perspective if some of those things that we think are solved are truly solved.
Thank you so much. Thank you, trustee Henry.
Thank you, Dr. Welsh. You dropped so many gems, I don't even know where to start. Okay, so you did speak to competition from charters and private schools and homeschooling, and also us having the opportunity to reimagine the school structures of those that are under-enrolled. Can you speak more about that and true choice and open enrollment?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, trustee Henry. Big question. That's good though. Yeah, a couple of things there. First of all, I mean, those of us here in the room, we're all familiar with COSA. We know what that means. I would venture to bet that if we walked out onto the streets and we said COSA to people, they wouldn't know what that means. And so I think we need to do a better job of really helping people understand what that is and how parents can use that to opt into a different school if that's something that they're looking for, and truly make it an open enrollment process. When you talk about campuses being under-enrolled, back in PV, one of the unique situations that we had in Arizona, and I believe Trustee Cavazos, you probably remember this from your experiences there, the entire state is open. So any student from any district can go to any school in any district. It gives some very unique opportunities, but there's some big challenges with that. And so when I think about that, I think about the fact that we had to be very effective at marketing schools and really identifying what was the niche of each of those schools. Every school's got some things that they do so much better than everybody else, and celebrating those things, helping to build those things up, and helping to make sure that our community understands what's happening in the schools. One other idea, which I think is a potential opportunity, and I thought it was just a really astute move in Paradise Valley. We had early childhood programs at a lot of our schools where there was under enrollment, and being able to utilize that space for some early childhood. Part of what was really exciting about that was it built an automatic pipeline for those students to remain in the district. Because if you're already attending a district school, you're not likely to move at that point. It was a genius move.
Thank you.
Thank you, trustee Johnson.
Hey, Dr. Walsh, thanks for the presentation. Can you talk a little bit about the academic achievement? Mentioned the subgroups and how there is significant gap within subgroups. Some of the plans you want to put into effect to see movement, meaningful movement in those subgroups in the first 18 months and then 36 and up to 60 months.
Sure. Thank you, Trustee Johnson. Yeah, it's a big issue. It's very easy to look at our aggregate data and feel like we're just doing okay there. But when you break it down and you talk about our IEP students, our ELL students, our African American students in particular, the data shows that those subgroups are struggling. I think a big piece of that comes back to our resource allocation. We do have weights built into our state funding formula for some of those populations. Those are not always being accurately reflected in our strategic budgets. So making sure that we're pushing those resources equitably to our campuses. And then much to Trustee Barone's comment earlier, students cannot be successful if they don't have a quality teacher in the classroom. So I think a big piece of it starts there with ensuring that our best teachers are in the schools where our kids need it the most.
Thank you. I'm going to insert myself to ask a question, and then there'll be second rounds because we still have time. Dr. Welsh, you mentioned your dissertation was on financial acumen. I think you said that. If you could just expand, what was the topic and how did you get to apply it?
You're making me happy. Everybody loves to talk about the dissertation. Inside jokes for everybody who's ever done a doctorate. So my dissertation was specifically using data development analysis to analyze the relative efficiency of Nevada secondary schools. Essentially, where do you spend your money to get the biggest bang for your buck? From that, in particular, things that I found from my research were putting programming in, and again, we're talking about middle and high schools. After school programs in particular was a big piece. Leadership at schools was very important. those were two areas in particular where we saw that finance that was associated with that had the greatest impact on achievement. So I think to that in particular, I think that is an area of opportunity for us, particularly at the middle level. I can tell you coming from back east where I grew up, we had a lot more things that kids could get plugged into, particularly at the middle school level. And I feel like that's where we lose a lot of kids. I don't think that the cost of some of those things is so exorbitant, and we could have a lot more ways for students to get engaged at school that will help keep them at school. You know, a lot of kids on those sports teams, that sport that they play is the reason they keep their grades up. And so I think having more of those types of opportunities built in could be something we leverage and wouldn't cost us.
Thank you. Trustee Esparza-Strachan.
Dr. Welsh, I want to ask you a very broad question, because on the threat you have federal funding as a threat. We are in a time where it's very unpredictable. So I really want to know, because you know that transformational leadership demands adaptable change to the times that we're in. So what would be your course of action, knowing that we could potentially have cuts and all kinds of programming and services would be impacted?
Yes, thank you. I'm an INTJ. Planning is in our DNA. I think the first thing we need to do is to plan for those eventualities and already know ahead of time what we would do if certain things impact. You know, if you see something on the horizon and you're not reacting to it, that's just poor leadership. So I think just planning is the first piece of it, to be able to identify what are some of those revenue streams that could be impacted and identify specifically what we would do if that happens. And I'm talking specifically about title funds. I'm talking about our food service, you know, through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and Medicaid. That's a big one right now. I'm sure you've probably even seen that in the news. State, I think, third most dependent on Medicaid funding out of all the states. So those are three areas in particular. I would look at where we have allocations in those areas and make sure we have plans in place to do as much as we could to be able to mitigate the impact of those cuts if that were to occur.
Thank you. Trustee Barron.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I noticed that you mentioned an opportunity, you know, our relationship with our bargaining units. Of course, you know, we know that our unions, of course, are very much an important stakeholder in all this. They not only, of course, you know, provide services to the public, they're members of the public. So can you talk a little bit about your relationship in the past or even in the present, and the present here with the associated bargaining units?
Absolutely. So, I mean, just a couple things, and some I think I've mentioned before, and others I have not. You know, my superintendent leadership advisory council that I had in PV, that was something where specifically I had to lose in my bargaining needs. So we would sit down with our principal leads, my teacher lead, my support staff lead. They didn't really have an administrative lead. They were a vital part of my decision making. We met as a team because oftentimes those things that are impacting the district, those are the people you want in the room to, one, help you problem solve, and two, if we walk out of that room having made a decision as a group, we own that message. And I think that's a big piece sometimes too, in that oftentimes the district makes decisions without the right people at the table. And I believe strongly that as a leadership team, those that are involved in the decision, if you have the right people sitting at the table, we all walk out together, unified in that path that we take. So I think that's one big piece of it. The second part to your question.
I was so intent there. I already forgot it.
Is it Trustee Cavazos?
I think so. Dr. Wells, so you're at your first presentation at the state legislature, and you're there to talk to them about our goals for the district. What do you want to talk to them about? What do you want to say?
No, thank you, Trustee Cavazos. I think first of all, highlighting some of what I've highlighted tonight with you in terms of our direction, our area of focus. I think it's important that we talk about strategic planning. And I know it sounds like a light thing perhaps, but truly a strategic plan is a way to set a roadmap for us as a district where it's very easy for us to see exactly what the path is on. You know, another big piece, as always in the state, comes down to funding. So I think that's where us as a district, and again, working with our stakeholders, working together with our stakeholders to help advocate specifically for targeted revenue streams that could help increase funding in the district. We are perennially around 45th to 50th in funding per pupil when you compare us to other states. Despite that, we are right around average, actually. It's right around the low 20s or so in terms of our teacher pay for entry-level pay, our average teacher pay, and our support staff. That tells me we spend a lot of time focusing on what matters most, which is trying to value our educators. But think of how much more we could do if we had more of those educators and the funds to actually do anything else other than be able to put those educators in our classrooms.
Thank you so much, Dr. Welsh.
Thank you. Trustee Stevens?
So you talk a lot about making decisions based off of data, which I think is great, but what do you do walking in day one and you want to make change, positive change, and you go to look for the data and it's not there? Because there are plenty of areas I'm finding where we're lacking in that area. So what do you do to make as informed decisions as you can for the betterment of our kids, knowing that maybe that data that you're relying on is not there?
Thank you, Trustee Stevens. I feel like you've been secretly reading some of my files somewhere. So I have a very detailed already, again, I'm a planner, very detailed plan in terms of some of the data that I need that is not necessarily public information that I plan on sharing out with staff and getting as soon as possible to help inform some of those, number one. But much like you said, I'm not sure if all of those pieces exist. I believe that's where it comes down to making sure we have the right people in the room, the right structures, so that we're meeting regularly with all of our key stakeholders and gathering that input so that we can make decisions and make decisions quickly. You know, having kind of ad hoc meetings with people and trying to do things one-off doesn't work. But when you have regular pathways for two-way communication, it makes it really easy to be able to essentially hit that circuit and be able to make those informed decisions. Although I would hope I can get as much data.
Thank you. Trustee Johnson?
Yeah, Dr. Welsh, you mentioned earlier, or at least in the initial focus areas, number 6 was that you wanted to direct more resources and decision-making down the schools.
Yes.
And that's not novel, right? Like that has happened, it is happening today. What does it look like to do it differently so that it is more effective than it is today?
Trustee Johnson, I'll be very specific there. I think one immediate action that we can take as a district, when I think about what's been happening with our strategic budgets in the last 2 cycles, both in September of last year and in January of this year, where we've seen 2 rounds of cuts at the school level. Again, from my understanding and my analysis, there has been none of that happening at the central office. And it's not to say that everything that we do is not important in some way. It all is. But I can tell you, when I was at CPD, we had budget cuts every year. It just happened to be one of those cycles where every year we were short money. And so we prioritized cutting the things that had the least impact on the classroom and on students. And we found innovative ways to do some of the same work that we were doing, but with less fun. Let me give a simple example. We were talking about testing for the seal of biliteracy. Students have to pass a language test in order to earn the seal. We identified a cheaper test. We identified, hey, which students do we think are actually going to pass this test? Let's make sure those students are getting it, not necessarily, somebody who may be raising their hand thinking, oh, I have a shot. It's like, that might be for life. So things along those lines. So I think one action specifically that we need to look at is identifying any resources that we have at Central that we could help push to schools.
Thank you. Trustee Henry?
Thank you. In your initial focus areas, you spoke about the engagement with student parents, guardians, teachers, etc. What processes or steps will you deploy to reach and engage those underserved, under-resourced, and overlooked students and families?
Absolutely. Thank you, Trustee. Couple of things. One, it comes down to rebuilding some of the relationships that we have had and kind of let lapse with our stakeholders and stakeholder groups, community groups. I'll give a good example of that. I was meeting with Yvette Williams not too long ago, Black Caucus, used to have regular meetings with the district and then just kind of petered off. So simple things like that. Again, it comes back to that meeting pulse I was talking about where you're connecting with people on a basis. I believe another untapped area is our school SOTs. One of the things that I thought worked really well in Paradise Valley was our United Parent Council. It was a group of essentially the parent leads from each of our campuses coming together, and it was an opportunity for two-way communication with myself and those teachers. And we talked about all the big things, and I answered questions and heard what some of the issues were. I believe our SOTs are an untapped resource in that respect, and I believe we could actually have kind of like a super SOT, if you will, within each of our municipalities. If you did the whole district, it'd be way too big. But to be able to aggregate some of those voices and be more engaged at a ground level.
Thank you. And we have 2 minutes left. I'm going to ask my question. Dr. Welsh, you mentioned decreasing enrollment, 5,000 students. What innovative strategies would you use to reverse or to increase our competition to attract those that are looking at us?
Sure, thank you, President. I want to point out one thing in particular that is important for everyone to be aware of. Part of the challenge that we have as a district, and it's not unique to us, it's across the country, is declining birth rates. You know, we're seeing just smaller families. So that is part of the reason why we're losing students. It's certainly not the only reason. I would say probably not. So specifically to that, it comes back to marketing our schools. I know somewhat recently, at least the last couple of years, our communications department actually got a marketing team around them, but really amping that up, putting some specific profiles out there, helping to build up some of the enrollment of those schools through the open enrollment process. That's a big piece. And again, that was something specifically that we worked on in Paradise Valley, where we identified those schools where we saw the biggest challenges, and that's where we focused on.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, let us give a round of applause for Dr. Welsh. We're going to take a 5-minute recess to transition out. It is 6:51. We'll come back at 6:56.
Take care, and I'm saying anyway. Let it go. Next year. Over. Take care, sir.
Okay, that's my TV field now. That's my TV. Yes, yes.
All right, 1 minute. If we could have the audience take their seat, 1 minute. Audience members, please take your seat. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. We are going to move on to item 2.02. We are not taking action on that item, but I don't know if we have any public comment cards. So we are, you did, David? Thank you. I don't see it. But Miss Lisa, do you have his public comment card for 2.02? Oh, Mr. You have a which item did you? Okay, for 2.01, we weren't it's not an action. We're not taking action, so we don't have public comment on that. So we're moving on to 2.202. It does say in the agenda for possible action, but we're not taking action. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Perez to explain the process in this area. Go ahead, Dr. Perez.
Thank you. So the next round of interviews after tomorrow are taking place on March 10th and 11th. The board will be interviewing on the 11th with community engagement and involvement in the process on the 10th. For the 11th, the schedule that the board approved consists of 45-minute interviews for the individuals that the board chooses to move on to round 2. And again, that's on March 11th. The purpose of this agenda item is to begin to work with the board at developing questions that they would ask during those interviews so that there is some continuity or across the different candidates. Of course, any follow-up questions to the answers that candidates give from the questions that have been developed with the board are certainly acceptable and desired. The 11 board members, just like tonight, if they each asked a question and it lasted for 2 to 3 minutes, you're talking about 1 question per board member, which would allow for the candidate then to have the opportunity to ask questions of the board, which is best practice. And so the purpose of tonight, there is no action, is to start to talk, discuss what questions the board would like to ask so that there isn't overlap and so that we begin to prepare for the interview on March 11th. Again, that's not tomorrow, all the way on March 11th.
Thank you, Dr. Perez. So each trustee, if you could be looking over the questions, these are just suggestions from our search firm. Also, we had previous questions from community members and trustees last quarter. So please look those over, pick your top 1 or 2. These are just some discussion. It helps to prepare us for tomorrow as we will finalize those questions. And so please look those over. Dr. Perez, can you share what will happen tomorrow with the questions that we...
Yeah, what I was thinking we could do is that if the board members go over these questions, if they emailed me just individually, not to the board, their question or even 2 questions, should there be room for that, then I can consolidate them, put any that are like each other near, together, and then that would leave room for secondary questions, right? If there is some overlap, then as a group could look at those secondary questions and maybe choose from those. That might be the most efficient way to handle this and give the board time to look through the questions that were in the reference material tonight.
I'm seeing some heads nod, so I think that is appealing. So the direction is to email you your top, your first and your second, so that you could consolidate and come up with a list. So Trustee Cavazos, do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question from the audience where a little confused. I just want to clarify for the audience that what we're talking about right now is going to be for the second round of interviews. Because I think some folks are thinking that we're changing the format for tomorrow. Format for tomorrow is also going to be performance-based on what the candidates present to us.
Yes, tomorrow is exactly the same as tonight. The questions that we are developing is for March 11th.
Thank you for that clarification. Trustee Esparza-Strachan?
Thank you, Dr. Perez. I want to ask you about the time allotted for them to ask us questions. Could you kind of give us a little bit of what that has been, and what does that look like from past decisions?
So the questions can vary from the candidates to questions about governance, questions about your timeline, when do you anticipate making a decision. In this case, it's very public, that's already out there. They may have questions about what your vision is in terms of restructuring. How do you go, what do you think the role is or the possibility of there being a new strategic plan in place for next year? Anything that would help them make a decision as to whether or not this is the right fit for them. I do think that in the case of Clark County, so much of it is transparent given the open meeting laws. They know when the decision is going to be made. Even the salary and benefits are very transparent. So there's not quite as many, I would say, typical questions that I hear candidates ask. However, I do think they would ask some general questions about what you are looking for in a candidate.
Thank you. Trustee Esparza-Strachan.
Thank you. I just had a follow-up. I have been getting questions, thinking ahead about the community forum. So depending on who goes to the final round, what type of, when will we have an opportunity to talk about, the questions that will be asked at those forums, or will they be generated by you?
the questions will be generated by the audience members. They won't be by us or by you. The idea there is that people come and they fill out a card and they're able then to give the card to the moderator and the moderator will ask the question. And so it truly is an opportunity for the community to interview the candidates.
That's very helpful because that was the very question that they would be able to ask their own questions.
Yes.
And that the moderator would be the person to kind of vet through the questions. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and just eliminate ones that are a repeat, for example. But yeah, it really is an opportunity for the community to interview the candidates and then to provide their feedback via the feedback form that will be available that night with a different QR code for the different candidates. So you would literally go to one QR code to give feedback on that candidate and a different QR code for a different candidate.
Trustee Dominguez?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Perez. I just was wondering, what is the deadline for the emails that we need to send to you for our questions?
So that's a great question. What would be reasonable? So I have to get them to Mr. Caruso by 3:30 to be uploaded as additional reference material for tomorrow's meeting. So my deadline is 3:30. So let's back that up and give me, I think I can do, you know, what? 12 noon I think is great. I was gonna say I could do it in 2 hours, but that gives me a little bit even more space. So 12 noon would be great.
And I see Mr. Caruso's eyebrows going up, so I think that's a good thing. No, he's saying
He
yes.
said, yeah. I'm learning about his deadlines.
Trustee Zamora?
Thank you, Madam President. Going back to Trustee Barnes' talk again, she mentioned about the community questions, there's going to be a card. I thought I had remembered that the conversation was going to be that we will also have a Google form for community to submit questions beforehand, so we're able to give time to your team to also filter them and make them, you know, more concise. Is that still the plan?
We did discuss that, and that absolutely can be the plan. I defer to the board, but yes, the plan was that we would have on the website a form for questions, maybe for people that aren't going to show up but are going to watch it, for example. So we can absolutely do that as well.
Perfect, because I do worry about the folks who cannot show up. You know, we're in Las Vegas, it's a 24-hour city.
Yeah.
We don't have a regular work schedule, right?
Right.
So being a little bit more accessible for those folks. Thank you.
And we liked that better than the on-demand questions, meaning like coming in as the event was going on. That's where we moved to the beforehand, because we thought, well, the people who are there could fill out the card. For those that are not there for the community portion, it would be better to get the questions beforehand so they weren't rolling in and us trying to do that, you know, in real time. And so we'll make sure that that is still the plan.
Thank you. And I have another question. I know this is going to be streamed, I believe, and it's also going to be recorded. When it's recorded, where will that be posted? Yeah.
So the only one that will be streamed and recorded will be the community group, giving some more intimate scenario for the parents and students and staff. So the one that will be recorded and live streamed will be the community group. And that recording will probably be in the place that it currently exists now, which is your EduVision. I would think that that would be the best place. And then we could also put a link to that on the superintendent search page.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna invite our board liaison to come up and add some context for that.
Thanks. Thank you, Madam President. So trustees, I just want to remind you that that's not on the agenda item. So we should be talking about that. The agenda item is for discussion of possible action, the approval of interview questions for finalists. Tomorrow night's agenda will be the community forum.
Thank you so much. Trustee Barron.
Actually, Madam Superintendent, Madam President, not that late yet. Madam, I did it again. Madam President, because of our board liaison pointed this out, I'd rather defer my question for tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Trustee Viasati.
And And just to reiterate on what you mentioned with the forum and the open questions, the moderator will not be vetting or
Oh, that's okay. Trustee Biassadi, that'll be for tomorrow. We can have that conversation on the forum to make sure we answer all our questions. And we may do some pre-training as well to help us to make sure that we have an understanding of what we're voting for tomorrow.
I was just piggybacking off of what my colleague said with the moderator, and I just wanted to clarify that there was no vetting in the questions.
Yeah, and then we can discuss that tomorrow, but yes, please, I'll write that down and make sure to bring that up as well. Thank you so much. Okay, see no other discussion for item 2.02. I'll go ahead and move to item 3.0. The next meeting of the Board of Trustees is Tuesday, February 25th, 2025 at 5 p.m. here in the boardroom. Next, we're going to move on to public comment 4.01. This is an opportunity for the public to come before us. I don't think I have the speaker cards though. Oh wait, there is one person that called in and got on the list, and that is Diane O'Connor. Please proceed.
Thank you so much. My topic is about Bob Miller Middle School, which is in Henderson and Green Valley. The purpose of me speaking today is we, as a community, have been having discussions with the school and our HOA regarding the safety of the children in the area that have been using our street and our community as a pickup and drop off. Our community was built in 1996, so prior to the school being built. I believe the school was built about 25 years ago. The area has been heavily impacted with traffic that parents have been using as an alternative to a drop off and pickup. And our community, for the past 10 to 12 years or so, there are more and more families using this area for a drop off and pickup. And one of the issues that we are concerned about, originally the area was built to accommodate 55 plus homeowners. And recently there are more families purchasing homes there, myself included. And with that, we are crashing almost daily with these families dropping off their children. So I'm dropping off my child uphill out of my area and they're dropping their children there. So I can't even get out of my driveway. There's also an elderly facility across the street. In some given time, they've had emergencies where some of the residents have heart attacks or they have a medical emergency and EMS is trying to get there. Their parents blocking their driveway. Also, trucks that are trying to deliver mail. Mailman is trying to deliver mail. They're blocking their mailman. They're blocking the truck that's picking up our trash. Also, there are children on bikes, e-bikes, scooters. The kids are trying to walk. The parents are actually getting in the way and making U-turns in our driveway and colliding with the kids. In some incidences, one parent actually ran over a child's foot and had to get out of the car and try to check the child instead of being a responsible parent and taking action and making sure that that child got medical attention. They got in their vehicle, proceeded to leave, and that child hobbled to school. That shouldn't happen. I'm not here to take sides. I'm here to ensure that these kids are getting to school and home safely. It's a responsibility of the parents. It shouldn't be my responsibility.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connor. David Gomez and then Anna Binder.
David Gomez, Nevada Peace Alliance president. I wanted to point out some things that I'm pretty sure there's indicators that tell people that I might be an extremist, especially when it comes to God. My father. I'm always going to be extremist for my father. But there's also indicators in what I do to find out exactly what people say and why they say it. You know, when a person says that homeschool is a threat, I worry about that. And I understand how people perceive what is being said, but you have to look beyond the lines of what is being said. I'm not a threat if I choose to homeschool my child against CCSD, because my business still pays the bond, a bond that I didn't agree to pay. And if you want to see the Clark County letter, I'll bring it to you so you can look and see exactly how much I'm paying every time I pay this bond for every single business in that area. I get tired of it. I'm a shareholder. I get told we're shareholders. I'm the first one to even say those words a long time ago. And as we look at this, I don't never want to be called a threat, especially when it involves my children. I choose and I pick how I want my children to be educated. If I choose homeschool, I choose homeschool. If I choose private school, I choose private school. If I choose charter, I choose charter. That's okay. But that just means we need to get better at some things so that I feel comfortable as a parent keeping my children here. So at this point, my children are currently in Clark County School District, but I don't like to be called a threat in a different way if I choose to homeschool. And some of these trustees knows what it's like to be called a threat. So be very cautious when you're thinking about some of the things that some people say, and then they commingle the words very, very subtle. Threat, shareholders, I want to implement community engagement. Can't be none of that if you're a threat. You're an opposite. So when I look at situations, I'm not too happy with what I read publicly. When superintendents get let go and don't want the public board don't want to tell you exactly why. When they got to call 911 on parents or protesters or people outside, this is transparent Nevada. Are you kidding me? Do you not know that if you get paid by the state, your income is there? I'm pretty sure she knows this. Teachers, different people, staff members, governors, police officers, it doesn't matter. What are you going to do? Call 911 on everybody? We're going to start this over again? We're going to start having people have arrested inside the boardrooms because they agree to disagree, but disagree with their feelings? I'm sorry. And then, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Ms. Binder? Okay, thank you. Then Chris Kiliani, and then Mr. I believe Joseph Butler.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I first attended my first school board meeting 46 years ago. I'm aging myself. But I just want to tell you, sitting in the audience tonight, I want to thank you. Something has changed, and it means your leadership has started to change. No one has rolled their eyes. Everyone is thinking, asking thoughtfully. Thank you. It made a huge difference, and I think that's going to set the tone for revitalizing this district and the culture that's been there. So just want to say thanks for that.
Thank you so much. Mr. Butler, and then Abraham.
Well, thank you for your time, Madam President. My name is Joseph Butler. I have been in Las Vegas since I was about 7 years old. I'm from Pine Bluff, Arkansas. I've been in the school district. So I personally experienced this school district, and you know, it's been a pretty good time. You can't complain. I've been out of school for some time now. I graduated from El Dorado High School at the time. Mr. Anslom or Dr. Anslom was principal there. I was going through some hardships. I was actually going to Sierra Vista and found myself making different choices. I was an athlete for pretty much the whole time. And I found myself making some different choices as I got older towards senior year. And as a result, I went to jail. And at the time, I went to El Dorado High School, just trying to clean my life up and trying to make sure that I continued on with my educational pathway. So I went to El Dorado, went to jail, came back to El Dorado, and I didn't know what to do. My hands were very, very much tied. I thought I was going to be able to walk the stage. I had to work very, very hard to graduate. I didn't really have too much familial support. My mom was, she's a single mother. She's working a lot. So it was really just up to me and the people who I met along the way, teachers, principals, and counselors to help me get through help me get the education and help me get to where I wanted. So after being locked up and getting back to El Dorado, I had like maybe a day or two before the school year was like maybe like a week or so. It's been a minute, and so they're like, "Well, I'm not sure what you're gonna do, but you can walk stage." And I'm like, "I don't know, I don't know." I worked too hard to not walk stage. I have like one credit missing, and then that's when Miss Angelo approached me. He was like, "Well, luckily for you, and luckily for me too, I've been thinking about a program for the kids that like you who have been struggling, have like wanted to come back and do better." And so he put that together for us, and then we spent some time in the library over the weekend just making up credits. He brought together a lot of teachers and counselors, and made a real push for the last bit of kids to graduate that year from El Dorado. And I really appreciate that, and it really makes me feel comfortable. It really makes me feel good, like having somebody like that in the school district, especially now that I have a kid that's in the school district, like going through the school CCSD. It makes me feel really good to have somebody like that, like overseeing things and being a part of the school district. I care about the kids so much, because I feel like especially kids, like kids come and go through the school district, and kids come, like they grow up and more kids come along. So it's hard to find people that really care about one person so much as to go out of the way to make such a change, make such a difference in multiple people's lives.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Mr. Abraham?
Hello, and Abraham coming up for the record. Thank you guys for putting this interview together. There is a change on board. I don't think I'm the only one that can say her with Chris G. It feels nice. The atmosphere just feels good. What I do want to talk about is about the Henderson Cowboys playing at the Sylvester Middle School. I wanted to provide an update. The team coaches were able to meet with the principal. We were able to figure out a workable agenda to practice. So I wanted to provide the update because I couldn't bring all the kids here, which they spoke very well last time. So right now, those kids there are about 300, almost 400 kids playing at the park right now. And so just wanted to echo a message that they wanted me to share with you. I said, thank you. So they were able to meet with the principal, figure out that schedule. And we still need some work with the Parks and Rec on side of this. So Sylvester is just one of many shared parks that we use in the school district. So just wanted to say what the kids told me, say thank you, because they're playing football and they're getting ready to win another winning season.
Thank you so much. With that ends our public comment. We'll move to item number 5. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Trustee Cavazos.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to make a motion to adjourn. I'd also like to thank Dr. Nancy Perez for providing us with some extra help tonight, some extra training before our meeting tonight, and our board president for initiating that training. And I just want to congratulate everybody on the board.
Thank you. Trustee Zamora.
Thank you, Madam President. I will second the motion, but of course I have to make my announcement of Nevada Week starts next week, so make sure you sign up. Nevada Reading Week is next week, so sign up. Thank you, everyone. I will adjourn. I will second that motion.
Thank you. I have a first and a second. Please cast your votes. That motion passes 7-0. The time is 7:24. Have a good evening. Yeah. Yeah. In your life. Yes. Yes. What?
Step out, see if he's not here, tell him he needs to actually. Yeah.
Think Joe's safe over there. Is it still rolling live?
I don't know. Not yet.
outside, is for medium, we still have. No, you're fine. We're trying to find out this media guy's equipment. So we're trying to be able to locate him at the same time.
John Logan?
Oh, they're in the car. Oh, you ended it already, dang. It's great.